Conversation. All right, we are recording now, and so Michael, Brendan, I was talking to Chris and Gier offline, but I'm just doing this recorded. I might cut the ends off of it and maybe add some music, but I wanted to kind of get into like just us and not do a stream where you're reading the comments. You always feel bad that the comments aren't being hit. So this is a podcast in the kind of like truest form, but so let's go around. I'll introduce you guys. Obviously, I'll just go clockwise is the way I see it. Gier, Leeds United, The View. I always appreciate Gier for being a part of the channel. I messaged you on Twitter when you were just kind of like ramping up your channel, and I appreciate you always being available and to come on. And it's been amazing to see your channel just explode. And then I also just love the fact that you were when I was looking at you were a UEFA B coach. So I was like, this guy knows a bit of footy at a level that I might not. So it'd be interesting to pick his brain. So Gier, just thanks for all that you do for the community, and I think you've been providing a massive just asset for Leeds United fans in the content creation world. So just want to say thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I love doing this podcast. Love doing it.
All right. Well, we love having you. So Michael Maynard at Maynard M on Twitter. Just we were doing another podcast together. Appreciate who you are and what you do, and you always provide a really interesting perspective. I think you've been ahead of the curve on a lot of your calls. So please do follow Maynard M on Twitter, aka Leeds Faithful. How you doing, Michael?
Yeah, doing all right. Glad to be back on. Thanks for having me again.
Brendan is a newer fan. I met him through Michael, also part of the Toronto Maple Leeds, I think, contingent, and newer fan. Came into Leeds through marriage. Is that right? Yeah. So and has been to the ground a couple of times now. So he's a fan.
Yeah, it was awesome to get there for the first time. I'm glad it was in the Premier League instead of the Championship. I will say that.
And newest edition, Chris and I met online. He's from Erie, PA. Yeah, and he's been a fan for. We were just kind of going over your origin story. Go ahead and say that again. How you kind of fell in love with Leeds.
Yeah, well, I mean, I played the game my whole life. Been a fan. I supported MLS for a while just because it's the domestic league. But and when my son got older, he plays as well. And I've seen Damn United. I saw the documentary over COVID, and then full disclosure, when the Americans contingent started to come on board, Tyler Adams, one of my favorite players. So we just started paying more attention, and that was obviously a little bit last season with the relegation battle, and then they came in and. I really started getting into it with the content. People like Jer and Alex, even your show later, but it's just the community, once you start getting into the community, that's what makes the difference. So yeah, we're all in, my son is a big fan as well. And so we watch the games, every game, talk about it all the time, and just happy to be here. So
what position is he playing?
He's a midfielder. He's a good player. He's just starting a new club, changed clubs this year. I'm thinking about sending him over to Uncle Jer's for like a month, so Jer can take him through the ringer. But no, he's doing well. He plays midfielder. His favorite players are like Modric and
good choice,
and Enzo, and even I've been trying to get him to watch Iniesta. Players like that. He loves to pass the ball. That's his favorite thing. And he's always got a ball on his feet. He's a hard worker and committed. So it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch him.
Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate you, coming in and stepping in. And so let's get the first thing I really wanted to kind of just get stuck in on is really center this conversation around the rumored ownership. What we think the 49ers could bring. Nothing's official, but kind of looking at it from that perspective. And then additionally, the managerial search. Obviously there's a lot of smoke out there that Gier knows about as far as players wanting to leave. Diego Llorente, Steele's coming permanent. There's a lot of smoke around Brendan Aronson looking to leave. Nothing's really official until this ownership kind of gets involved. We have a manager. Things could change. I'm hopeful. But let's just talk about kind of the 49ers, and we'll start with Jir. Jir, you've done a lot of research. It's always great because you do your homework. Let's talk really about kind of the rumor that's out there is that, we haven't heard anything from the 49ers. What's going on? They've been poor about communication. Like what's your take on that the silence that's happening right now a little bit this week?
I'm okay with it. I'd like to think that silence means that they're busy. I'd like to think that there's a lot to be sorted out. I mean, the club doesn't stop running because there's a takeover happening. These people are already on the board. They're already working in the club. So they have day-to-day stuff to get through as well as trying to organize a takeover. And I know you can do an awful lot of stuff virtually now as well, but it's not ideal when people are in different countries. And, so I'm okay with that. I think there's been enough positive noises. I've kind of been reading between the lines on a few different people's articles as well of Phil Hay with the Athletic a couple of weeks ago saying the takeover probably wouldn't happen now at the Leeds in the Championship. But if you read Phil Hay's article 2 days ago, he says the takeover is progressing nicely in the background, which means he is now acknowledging the fact that a takeover is happening. So that's enough for me to be okay. The stuff that came out in the Mail, the Telegraph, seems to be validated enough, and the process says that the EPL approved it. But because Leeds shares will transfer to the EFL have to approve it. They've very timely and very nicely changed their ownership and directors test rules today, which will take immediate effect. So if anyone on this 60 people may have any form of a criminal record, they'll be disqualified immediately. So there's clarity needed around, do all 60 need to get tested, or is it just the 2 that are coming onto the board? Because we know there's 2 new appointees coming onto the board. So there's enough noise in the background for me to be happy enough with it. I'm glad we're not doing our business too publicly because that's got us where we are with Radrizzani. And then from speaking to a couple of 49ers fans over last couple of weeks, they've said, get used to silence. 49ers don't talk publicly. They do their business in the background. They keep quiet until they have something and then they announce things. So he said, if you want to know it, to just be working in the background, you're not going to get any PR or public facing inside of it. They don't do that. So put all that together. I'm comfortable enough in the silence, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think you can really say anything until everything's finalized. And even when you do want to see, you only get one bite at this apple to announce that and one really opportunity to make a first impression, of which, I think they've kind of been doing, but this will really get an opportunity to do it. Yeah, Michael, what's your kind of take on some of the rumors that have broken as far as the 49ers takeover and then the silence?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've talked about before on here is just hoping for sort of the next level in professionalism. And I think one of the things you do have to give Andrea Radrizzani credit for is that he did bring a certain level of business acumen and professionalism to the way that Leeds was being run compared to the way it had been running before he arrived. And obviously there are some things I think that needed to be improved in that respect. One of them is things like the leaks and things that we've seen coming out of Leeds. And I think the silence so far, when there's obviously so much activity going on right now, and the fact that it's not being leaked out is a sign that we're dealing with a really professional core of people that, have a good sort of have a grasp of what it is that they're looking to achieve, and have a good grip on everything that's going on around them right now. So I'm happy for that. And if it is in fact a sign of a greater level of professionalism in the way the club is going to be run, I'm really happy for that, because that's exactly what I've been looking for. And I think we need that to make that leap really from a championship club to a Premier League level club. I know obviously we're back in the championship now. We're going to have to make the leap again in terms of leagues. I think that may have been one of the missing ingredients from when we went up, was that ability to sort of operate like an actual Premier League club. That's why we're not there now. That's why we've dropped down. So hopefully that's a good sign.
Yeah. Brendan, you have the benefit of being both a 49er fan. So you've been following that club for a long time, and obviously a Leeds United fan. What's your take on the probable, we're knocking on wood, takeover, and what's your hope for the club, as well as the lack of communication, quote unquote, that's been going on?
Yeah, I think you can always tell if an organization is well run because they don't leak And that's exactly what the 49ers have not done since 2017, ever since Jed York finally got his shit together and decided to become a proper owner. Because for years before, Parag was in there too. So he's experienced this side with the 49ers were a dumpster fire of an organization. They would leak everything to the press. They would make sure everything got out, especially if they were trying to, back in 2014, they were trying to fire Jim Harbaugh, who was one of the most successful coaches in years. And the fan base didn't want him gone, but they started leaking stories about rifts behind the scenes, so on and so forth. You have not seen that with them since 2017. And they've been one of the best run teams in the NFL since then. So I agree with what has been said so far. That should bring a level of professionalism. It should help them do their business a little bit better. And if that is a pattern moving forward, I would assume that any manager news, any transfer news is all agents trying to put that out into the public because that's what they do. That's what they're paid to do. They want you to be linked with teams, their clients. So don't talk. I think that's a good thing. And I agree with Michael. I agree with Gier. It is, I think, a great thing moving forward that they haven't leaked at all. It should hopefully make the fans trust them in the longer term, but they're still going to have to earn that when they take over.
Yeah, I'm interested, Chris, like, too, you're a newer fan, like Brendan and I. What's your take on the Rad Razzani kind of like era? What happened? Obviously, we were all kind of disappointed in the relegation. And then, like, what's your hope for the 49ers moving forward?
Well, I've been following sports my whole life, and the organizations the clubs and the teams I follow. That's one of the things as you look at is how stable of a team is it from the ownership standpoint, and you saw it cracks right from the beginning as I started following the club, and hearing from fans and just kind of putting two and two together. You have a manager like Bielsa who is world renowned. I think he papered over a lot of those cracks. And so once that was gone, you started to see what was going on, how it was run. But the 49ers are backed by they're a family business, and they have stability, and they'll bring that to the club. And stability, I mean financial stability. I mean, they have a lot of money. They're going to invest a lot of money into the club. And I think that stability breeds consistency. And I think that's another thing I've noticed with this club this year is just so much instability. Consistency was not there. You saw it on the pitch. You saw it behind the scenes. So it's no wonder they ended up where they were in the table. But yeah, I think the 49ers will bring that. I think there's going to be obviously transition. They're going to have to, now that they're in charge, they're going to have to learn. And I think from an American perspective, you don't hear from the owners very often at all. So I think in the English football, you'll see a demand for the owners to make statements and get out there and let the fans know what's going on. So I don't know if they will take that approach to be more visible, but I agree. I think it's good they're not saying anything. I think there's probably a lot of things that are already perhaps in place, maybe with the director of football, the manager, and we'll find out as soon as the takeover is official. I think you'll see a progression of a very fast, rapid set of appointments that will come through. I don't think they've just been sitting back and waiting. And then what I read today before coming on was something interesting that actually the 49ers are now, they basically gave Rad's money to help them buy Sampdoria. So they're going to be minority. It's kind of a minority stake in that club. So they'll still be tethered, which is a little concerning, but Rod's is completely out. I don't know if he was like, I'm not leaving unless you help me buy this other club. But basically holding them hostage. So I think the 49ers were like, fine, whatever it takes. We'll give you some cash. You can go play with your new toy, have fun with that. But, you're going to leave us alone here. And by the way, we're going to invest a little bit. So if you do make money, we're going to recoup some of that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just read that. So we'll see what happens.
Have you guys heard similar reports that have just come out? Go ahead. Just anybody. Have you guys heard that? Yeah.
Not as much detail as Chris said there. I saw it pop up and I assumed it was similar to the reports in the papers over in Italy about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they said that 49ers were going to be a minority stakeholder in Sampdoria. But given the state of the relationship between Radrizzani and the 49ers, I'm likely to think what Chris has said is on the money. It's look, here's some money, just go away, you know. And then Radrizzani stops being a Leeds problem, and that just becomes a 49ers problem then.
Yeah.
They're just dangling the carrot away to get him away from Leeds.
Yeah.
Like, walk over there, look over there. There's nothing.
We'll still talk to you. We'll just maybe someone else's house, though. It just won't be in this house anymore.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you.
That's right. You know, there's a lot of talk about value differentiations, right? So we're sort of saying, you know, the standard line that's been out there reported by just about everybody is that with Leeds in the championship, our asset value is like 170 million or whatever. And then there was some talk from a few places saying that, you know, Radrizzani wanted the valuation at 200 million, and maybe that's how they've bridged the gap. They said, no, look, we'll pay this for this asset, but we'll also give you some money to be investors in that asset over there. That's kind of a creative problem solving sort of thing. I don't know if that's exactly what's happened.
Could be,
but it makes sense to me.
Do you think, because putting two different sets of numbers together here and trying to get 4, the bridging loan that he was trying to get for the mortgage, he was using Elland Road for, was to get a loan short term to as part of this amount of money needed to buy Sampdoria. He clearly didn't go through with that in the end. So is this that money, I wonder? Is this them going, we'll do that, give us the ground, because the stadium is supposedly included in the sale. So here's the money for that. You can loan it back to us, or we'll take a small minority and we'll get it back over time, but off you go.
Yeah.
I think it's the same.
Yeah, probably.
Well, and that fits in that roundabout $30 million or £30 million bracket that we were talking about as well in terms of the valuation, right? So you got the 170 to 200. The stadium value fits just right about in that range, you know, and then it gives them that opportunity to do exactly that. So, I mean, you know, we're all obviously just speculating here, but
absolutely, yeah,
it certainly makes a lot of logical sense for that to have been perhaps what's gone on.
Yeah, and I think that's a win-win for the 49ers. I mean, they've just expanded their portfolio and got rid of Rads at the same time. So good on them.
We really haven't had a chance to talk about this, but how will the Radrizzani era be remembered, like, in your mind? Like, ups and downs, right, so to speak, I guess. But the end has been so... that bad taste in the mouth. It's just gone too long. It's almost like if he sold last year, he would have had much more money and kind of would have been perfect for him. But he hung on 1 year too late and lost a bunch of money. And obviously he still winds up on his feet. But what do you think, Jir? How does the Radrizzani era kind of like, now that you're taking a step back, maybe, how does it feel for you?
I think it's finishing poorly, but to quote an iconic movie, Batman, you either die a hero or you stay around long enough to become the villain. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately for him, he's stuck around a year or two too long, where he's gone from being the man that brought Leeds back to the big time to being, when's he leaving? So
Stole my line.
Did I? Right there, Michael. It's right there.
A great quote.
It is.
It'll be on a motivational poster someday.
Yeah. It's like with Arsene Wenger. That was like him with Arsenal, you know. And exactly. Go ahead.
He had some titles though, so I think like the feeling towards Wenger has definitely softened over his absence in the last couple of years. I think he got a really good welcome back to the Emirates last year when he went back there. So I think over time the sentiment softened. Unfortunately, with us, we tend to be pretty cemented in our views of people. Once it's like, right, you're not for us anymore, that's me forever. So I hope in time people will realize, you know, he did do some good for the club. If nothing else, he took it off of Chilino, you know, when nobody else was going to deal with that absolute crazy man. He did it and he took it away from them. And then if the 49er stuff works out, then he might be looked at more fondly as the guy that took us away from a crazy person and gave us to a professional organization, and look where he left us. So maybe, but I think it's just sad that we're right back where we started in terms of division. It's a shame of the whole thing.
Michael.
Yeah, well, I think what Jared says is absolutely right. and I gave credit to Radrizzani right off the top of my earlier remarks when we did the first round. I think he did do a lot of good things in the beginning, and I think just stayed and held on a little bit too long. There would have been an ideal time for him to make the exit, and it would have been probably a year ago, at least, if not before then. And we've discussed on this pod before, and I know that you've also put out videos, Alex, just basically discussing that issue, which is that Radrizzani does not have the resources and perhaps not even the ability to run a club at this level in the Premier League. Not saying that he can't do it in a top league elsewhere. Potentially, can he get Sampdoria up and maybe run an effective organization in Serie A? He may well be able to do that, but the Premier League is just too far for him to be able to do. And the situation that we've had in the boardroom with this split has not done anyone any favors. So I do think you have to give him credit where it's due. But, I also look back and give Cellino some credit as well. I mean, he was crazy and did a lot of wild things that, that I think gave us a lot of bad press and were quite embarrassing quite often. But at the same time, he also made Leeds United a valuable investment in the sense that he stripped a lot of things down. He cut a lot of costs. He did the sort of thing that some managers do. And perhaps that was something that was needed for us to be able to sort of make that transition into someone else who can then, be the bridge into hopefully what will be a long and fruitful relationship with the San Francisco 49ers. I'm reminded of another quote from the show Mad Men, where Don Draper asks, "What is happiness?" It's just a moment before you need more happiness. And that's sort of where we're at with Radrizzani, is that he made us happy for a while, but now we need to be made happy again.
It's a much more original quote, to be fair.
Yeah, here's me being kind. I mean, maybe he learns from this. But as far as the resources go, if you don't have the resources, the table's tilted, right? Against you if you're not one of the richest clubs in the league. So you've got to maximize every other advantage that you can get as far as recruiting a manager and getting these systems right. Your U21, there's all these other little things because you're not a Chelsea, you're not a Newcastle with a blank check behind you. So unfortunately, I don't think he got that formula right. It's harder, but I don't think he did. So yeah, Brendan or Chris, do you guys have any other thoughts on kind of bye-bye Rads?
Now I'm glad he's gone. That's for
sure.
I mean, look, as somebody who got into the team in the 2019-2020 season, I saw a ton of good and a little bit of bad, and that little bit of bad was horrific and horrendous. And we're all on board with that. But even knowing what it was like when he took over, what was it, 2017-2018 season, you're building, you just miss out on promotion 2018-2019. So you could see the build up, and then you get promoted, you finish 9th. And I saw somebody tweet, I think a couple days after they got relegated, and it's I wish, and this person was watching highlights from the 2020 season, how incredible it was, scoring goals all the time, attacking football, just the darlings of the Premier League, everybody's second favorite team. And it's too bad that we all didn't, and Rads didn't have somebody to tap him on the shoulder and say, "This is as good as it's going to get under your reign, buddy." And maybe if that was the case, maybe he sells a season or two earlier than he did. Because, man, it fell off a cliff after that. I mean, he got bailed out and had one more chance after they survived on the final day a season ago, and that should have been his exit, especially because the resources. I mean, you could see that coming from a mile away. We talked about it on a pod I was on with you guys somewhat recently. You got to get up to spending $40 to $50 million or pounds on players and transfer fees. He could not go above the £30 million mark, and that's not going to get you too far in the Premier League unless you're a Brighton or a Brentford. That's a very, very well-run club with apparently a lot of really smart people behind the scenes, because look at them now. Now they can go into that bracket because they made so much money. So, yeah, it's too bad because, I mean, I did that last Saturday. I watched a lot of the highlights from the 2020 season. It's wow, we did have it really good. And who knows how long it's going to take to get that back. Hopefully only 1 year, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was breathtaking football. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I never took him as being disingenuous. there was a part of me who thought, like, I think he wanted, obviously the club to succeed. I think he wanted things to go well. There was a report in November. I think he was basically crying out, "I'm out of cash. Like, I don't have enough money to do this." And I know the 49ers were taking most of this year. I think it was a 12-month process of just building capital. So it might have been a timing thing. They didn't necessarily have the money for a takeover earlier. But yeah, I think the thing that sticks with a lot of people though is just, recency bias, where he wasn't at the last game, didn't show up. And that's going to leave a mark, with a lot of people, and probably sweep away some of those good feelings a lot of people had. But I think as time goes on, people will look back and have different opinions. But yeah, it's just time to move on. It's time to move on.
Yeah. I wonder if he could have shown up and taken his medicine. Would have been interesting. I just want really two questions that I want to kind of finish with. And anybody can jump in on these, but the first of these two is director of football or sporting director. What are you guys leaning towards? And Michael, we went in on this a little bit, but I mean, maybe you want to take a first bite at it. What's the advantage of both? Do you know, like director of football, sporting director? Is sporting director similar to like a general manager? Like what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think the terms are often used interchangeably, and then just maybe subtle differences. And I know there's other models as well where you just have a head of recruitment, and more of the day-to-day is even left to the manager, who is not just a head coach, but sort of has that. And, and then you go way back, right, to the times where like really it was the manager who was doing all those decisions, recruitment decisions, on-field decisions, coaching, all the rest of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think the way that I sort of see it now, and I talked about this last week, is that sort of modern smart football clubs have a director of football model where there's a person who essentially is in charge of overseeing the boards, like is in the owners, the teams, like that's really where sort of the entire culture gets set, is at the board level. The owners decide what kind of an organization do we want to be, and they hire a director of football who is more or less a general manager in the North American sports sort of idea, who is in charge of not just player acquisitions and, I mean, obviously trades in the North American market, but transfers, who's in charge of sort of the contracts with players and that sort of thing, and the negotiations, but also is doing that for a particular purpose, right? There's a philosophy that comes from the board level, and their job is to implement that philosophy and have that throughout everything that happens in the club, from, sort of the proverbial tea lady, all the way up through the coaching staff and the players. And essentially make sure that everyone is rowing in the same direction. It is a lot of power to concentrate in one person's hand, but at the same time, they have to establish that as a partnership with all the other higher level managers in the organization, like the head coach, who's responsible, obviously, for what happens on the field. Director of football really is going to set that philosophy and say, look, we're going to recruit players for this particular style of play. We want to be an attacking front foot kind of club that has a lot of possession, that does, for example, just say the Bielsa model, right? A lot of possession. We're a team that wants to have a lot of wing play, so we're going to make sure that we bring wingers into the club. We want to have this particular identity, this tactical identity. I'm going to bring in players for that. I'm going to bring in a coach who can coach that and who can set up the team that I create to play that kind of identity. That's what modern football clubs are doing. That's what smart clubs like Brighton and Brentford and some other clubs that are punching way above their weight are doing. They have these models where they say, look, it doesn't matter. Brighton can lose their coach in Potter, and they can bring in someone else who can do the exact same thing, very similar kind of football, but even better, right? Because there's a good base to build on. If you're always basing it around who's the head coach in charge, let's recruit for that particular person, then you're bouncing around all over the place, and you're going to have players that aren't fitting together in a nice cohesive unit. Unfortunately, and the irony is that we had a director of football model, but our director of football actually didn't follow the model. He started recruiting for a particular coach, right? He had this idea that Jesse Marsch was going to be the ultimate Bielsa replacement. This was how he was going to game the system in the Premier League, and started recruiting specifically for that style and only that style. And we've ended up with players that really aren't capable of playing on other styles. right? We need different types of profiles now.
Yeah, it just goes back to like the wide, narrow, and the complete. I don't know if it was a 180, but it was certainly a 160. I don't know, 160, 175, 179. Like, you know what I mean?
It wasn't
from
a
Bielsa to
consistent
Marsh.
identity, right?
Yeah.
So Michael, what? So in that, and I agree with you totally. And so we're hearing all these rumors about managers. Shouldn't that come after then the director of football?
I think it should. I think that's I think it should. I think you can do it the other way if you know who you have in mind already. So if it just happens to be that you hire the coach first, the head coach first, because you already have this idea of what you want, and you already know that there's maybe a short list of directors of football that will also fit that model, you can do it the other way. But ideally, you would want the director of football helping out with the coach selection as well as the player recruitment. I mean, that's the way it really should be done. With everything that has to get done right now with Leeds, with the ownership and everything else, you could forgive them for maybe going the other way and trying to get a coach in. I mean, the players do have to come back at some point, so it's understandable that they might go the other way, but ideally that is what you would do, is the director of football would be involved in selecting the coach and hopefully not the other way around.
I'll get to get you, Jer. You look like you're interested in digging in on this, but in America, sometimes that happens where like the head coach is appointed and the general manager comes in later, and it's like this guy the whole time. There's friction because it's like this is not my guy.
Yeah,
like you can tell the DOF or the sporting directors in the back of his mind going, "This isn't my guy." But yeah, what do you want to say, Jer?
I was going to say, just based on what Michael was saying there as well, and Chris had said something earlier on that I wanted to kind of pick my interest as well. You end up with an unbalanced squad when you do it the way Leeds did it. You smash two models together and you're not really sure at all. I think Michael said it perfectly when he used the word identity, because that's what Bielsa was creating, was an identity, a Leeds United style, the Leeds United way. And then when the first move at replacing it didn't work or hit a hiccup, they threw the baby out with the bathwater, panicked and started smashing things together to see what would work, and defaulting to type, unfortunately. And I think that fell because the man that was making that decision, that director of football who had his hand on every single pie in the club, was also that way inclined himself. If you look at his antics in the press box, if you look at how he reacted to things emotionally, he can go from one end to the other end rapidly between the two, and not have a clear distinction. And he can do it in a way where he's so convinced that this is the right way to go now. We were wrong, but we're right now, and you're not right now. And the message gets mixed. You end up buying players that don't work anymore. The word that was used all season was unbalanced, and it looked like it. And unbalanced teams get relegated, and we did. And then you look at the a sporting director model, where you're kind of just breaking that up a little bit more, maybe insulating it a little bit more by having like your head of recruitment will report to your sporting director. So technically they're still making that decision. They'll probably have the final say on that, but it just removes them maybe from the front line a little bit and allows them to operate in the background. And again, if the 49ers are kind of this quiet professional organization, they'll want to have those layers in place to, cushion people from public stuff. Because as we all know, running a football club is a very public business. So you've all of that. And then when Chris was saying earlier on about when this takeover is announced, expect like rapid fire appointments. And that's where I'm at with this. I think Leeds, the owner is going to set the style. That's going to be his vision. Ultimately, it's going to be the ownership saying, I want us to be this. And then they will hire a director of football to facilitate that. And then they will hire the coach to facilitate that, and so on and down the ladder it goes. But I think they could, because the 49ers have been in the club for the last 4 years, because they've seen the identity Leeds were trying to create, and now they're trying to recreate that again and go back to that. I think they can recruit a manager before a director of football, because they're recruiting for this specific style, which means they will recruit the director of football for this specific style as well. It's not the ideal way to do it, as Michael said, but theoretically it can work. But then, theoretically communism works as well, but that doesn't work in practice. So, you just want to have a director of football or sporting director come in who doesn't have an ego. And then that issue of being my guy stops being an issue as much. But again, I would hope that 49ers are putting their ducks in a row. They've spoken to people. They've spoken to coaches. Kinnear's been interviewing managers apparently already. I've seen the odds fluctuate rapidly this week as well on people as well. So there's stuff going on there. And you would hope then as soon as the signing of the contract goes in, and once the EFL get back and say, yeah, you can go ahead and proceed with that, and then everything gets done. I mean, you could see, as Chris said, your director of football, your sporting director could get hired, your manager could get hired this same day. They may already be in talks. This could already be agreed behind the scenes and NDA signed. So you just never know. And I'm saying all of that in the assumption that Leeds is still a relatively reasonably well-run club, which it probably isn't. And that it's not what we were used to the last time in the championship, which is we'll get to transfer debt. We'll get to the players coming back for pre-season, and we won't have signed anybody. We'll have sold half the squad. We won't have a manager in place. We'll be 2 or 3 weeks behind every other club. So I'm hoping with the positive and that the lessons we're learning, the 49ers being there already, means that this stuff isn't going on.
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in there with what Jer said. I think you can have multiple searches going on at one time. It doesn't have to be sequential, and you can talk to a manager and show him a list. These are a few names we're looking at for director of football. You can show the director of football, these are some of the coaches, and there may be some connections there. It looks like, Stuart Weber, for example, I was looking up, he left right after Brendan Rodgers came in, like 2 months later, and he's also worked with Fark. So maybe they're talking about some of those relationships. So one may help you get the other and vice versa. So I'm just hoping like they're using those relationships and talking to different people to see what would be a good fit. Because as you said, Alex, like you want them to be their guy. Like you often see it doesn't work when they come in and they're like, well, that's not my guy. So I'm going to wait and then get someone else in that's more my guy.
Yeah, and there's friction. That's an important relationship. Like they need to almost be hand in glove. That DOF and the head coach, and the coaching staff. But yeah, I just want to quickly say the last question, and we can dig more about this. Maybe we'll do another one as well next week. But let's early doors. There's been some rumors of managers. What are your takes on kind of the short list of managers, and who would you like to see come in here?
Well, before we dive into that, I just wanted to say, based on what Chris was saying about you could be doing both at the same time, and you mentioned Stuart Weber. I'm not sure if you brought that up because of the betting markets, but Daniel Farka is now the number one choice on the betting markets. He's plus 187. And this morning, guys, he, I think, was third or fourth in the list. So those odds have
moved up all right. But Corbrand had gone level with Gerrard as the favorite.
Yeah, so now Farka is plus 187, Corbrand's plus 300, Gerrard's plus 400, and then everybody else is plus 1,000. So I'm starting to think.
I didn't know that.
yeah, I'm starting to think, Michael, is what you said. You could be talking to a director of football. You know who you have in mind. Maybe he gave a list, and it's no coincidence that Farka has gone way up the list since he got axed at wherever he was. I can't remember. That's it. And I wasn't going to even try to say it. Yeah. So, Chris, I'm not sure if that's where you saw that, but I was going to bring that up exactly. The Farka.
Yeah. No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Not surprised though. If they're talking to Weber, and maybe again, like he made some controversial comments, I guess, about women's football lately. And if the 49ers probably have a strong PR team, they're not going to announce him yet and let the fans have a go at him.
Yep.
They're going to keep it quiet, wait till they hire a manager, maybe, bring them all in at the same time or close to it. So there's not a lot of heat on one particular person. Because we'll all have our opinion no matter who it is. So I don't know.
I know the mere mention of Gerard gives Gier some
all of us, man.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be my first choice. Gier, I know you've got a brother that's I know you got a brother that's a massive Villa fan. He was nosediving that team. What was the inside information from your brother from Villa that it just didn't work?
Same that's been said by every Villa fan I've seen be asked on social media, what's your thoughts on this? And, I've seen a couple of streams as well with Villa fans on it. And I asked my brother, would he do a video with me today? Like, just do a quick recording of, the Villa fan view. And he was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. So that was the end of that. But he has very strong opinions on Steven Gerrard. Like most Villa fans, when it happened at the start, the idea of having Steven Gerrard associated with your club, Steven Gerrard talking about your club as his club carried a huge amount of weight, and they were all very excited about this. And he said the style of play didn't change too much from what they had been doing, but it was enough to get them safe. But he said by the time the second season had started, there is no style of play. And the way my brother describes it is there was no discernible style of play from Steven Gerrard, from any of the managers we'd had before them. Some Villa fans have described him as the worst Villa manager they've ever seen. He fell out with players, his recruitment and his name buying power, because he's Steven Gerrard, brought in an aging Coutinho who flopped after a couple of games and went back to sit on the bench. So I don't get what the draw is. Yes, he won a title with Rangers in Scotland, but he won one. And Postecoglou in 2 years has won 5 trophies in that space of time. Your nan should win a league title with Rangers if you're in Scotland. It's not a 2-team league. Yeah, it's a 2-team league, and if you beat them 4 times, you're going to win the league. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And then when he left, the guy that took over did it better again than he did. And then if you look at Villa getting rid of him and bringing in Unai Emery, and we were ahead of Villa when they sacked Steven Gerrard.
Yeah,
we were ahead of them. They're now in Europe next year, and we're in the Championship. It couldn't have gone any further away. So Keith kind of just said to me, "Hope to God you don't get him. You don't want him." And then I saw a screenshot of another Villa fan today saying he's the worst thing that's ever happened to the club. We don't want him. So I don't want him. I don't get it. I don't see the attraction of having Steven Gerrard. But I'm Irish, so I don't get the whole, he played for England and blah, blah, blah. So I don't get that emotional connection to him as a player. But he wouldn't be on my short list of managers I'd want to take over Leeds.
Yeah, interesting. Very well. I haven't seen many people in the pro Steven Gerrard camp anymore after this run at Villa. We're gonna go ahead and end the recording, but I just want to say thank you to Gier, Leeds United, The View. We're gonna get stuck into as this managerial search goes, we'll get stuck into other managerial candidates. Gier's got a great interview with a Lowry fan, I believe, or he was at a club that kind of unpacks the
Charlton fan,
Lee
Boy, about the style of play.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So please check that out. Leeds United, The View, Cheer. I appreciate you, Michael, Maynard M, Brendan Paniker, his handles below, and Chris, big up. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
For coming on. And I want to say, everybody that's watching this, please do give the 49ers some time. After all this, the contracts are signed and stuff, they still have to do the photos, they've got to plan out all that social media. They're probably going to have some recordings. They're going to line up the BBC. They're going to line up Sky. You know what I mean? All that stuff's got to be booked. And then they'll proceed with probably a 24-hour or 12-hour media blitz. So just give it some time and give them an opportunity, to earn your respect. And, we can also dig in on other stuff too, like Parag Marath and the ownership group and who's in that kind of 49er enterprises as well. Smash the like, subscribe on the journey to 1,000. Thanks, everybody.